There. Very good morning, all. Uh, in the last class, we have discussed the types of risk, the two, especially the systematic risk. Today, I'm going to explain other type, that is unsystematic risk. So we already know that we have two dimensions in the risk. One is systematic risk and another one is unsystematic risk. Systematic risk, which is already discussed in the earlier class. So today we are going to discuss unsystematic risk. See, first of all, we should know, and you should keep in mind, the risk means probability of loss or probability of injury or probability of damage. Okay, so that probability of loss, damage, injury maybe arises in many aspects in the organization. So that is a risk which is majorly concerned with the finance. Okay, so here we go, unsystematic risk. So we already know that unsystematic risk is due to the influence of internal factors prevailing with an organization. So this unsystematic risk is affects or happens is occurred due to the internal factors, the factors which influence internally. Those factors leads to unsystematic risk, and such factors are normally controllable from an organization's point of view. We already know that systematic risk is non-controllable risk, but unsystematic risk can be controlled. We can control this unsystematic risk. Our organization can able to mitigate the unsystematic risk. Mitigate means reduce. ನಾವು ಮಿಟಿಗೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಬಟ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ರಿಸ್ಕನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಹಿಯರ್ unsystematic risk can be mitigate. We can reduce those risk internally by the organization or within organization. The risk can be mitigated. The people who are working in the organization, by taking a right decisions at the right time, they can reduce the probability of damage or probability of loss. Okay, so here unsystematic risk normally controllable by an organization, and it is a micro in nature as it affects only a particular organization. It is a micro in nature. Unsystematic risk, which is controllable by the organization, and it is very teeny in nature, small in nature. It affects only a particular organization, or it affects only a particular aspect in the organization. ಯಾವುದಾದ್ರೂ ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಎಂಟೈರ್ ನೇಷನ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ, ಅಥವಾ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಮೇಲೆ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಓನ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ unsystematic risk. If it is happened, it is occurred within the organization, it affects only a particular aspect. It doesn't affect entire organization. Okay, so that is what a unsystematic risk is, and it can be planned so that necessary actions can be taken by the organization to mitigate the risk, to reduce the effect of the risk. This unsystematic risk is controllable in nature. Because of that reason, we can make a plan. The two to control, to mitigate the risk within the organization. The management can take a decision and they can control this unsystematic risk by proper planning. ಓಕೆ, ಪ್ರಾಪರ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಈ ಒಂದು ಅನ್ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ರಿಸ್ಕನ್ನು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ, ಸೊ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ 3 types ಆಫ್ ಅನ್ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. One is business or liquidity risk. Okay, so here you can able to see that unsystematic risk. So here we have 3 types. So one is business risk. It is also known as liquidity risk. And second one is financial or credit risk. And thirdly, operational risk. Okay, yes. And next let me explain one by one. So first one is business risk or liquidity risk. I think you might have know what is a business or what is a liquidity. Liquidity means easily convertible into cash. Any securities or any asset, if it is able to convert into cash that very easily, that is what liquidity. Liquidity means just the way of converting the assets into a cash. Okay, yes. And see, let me explain the business or liquidity risk. Business risk is also known as liquidity risk. Since it originates from the sale and purchase of securities affected by business cycles, technological changes, etc. This business or liquidity risk will occur due to the sale and purchase activities. That to sale and purchase of securities that affects the business cycle due to technological changes in the organization or in the stock market. Changes in the prices of the securities will affect the organization, or changes in technology will change the business cycle. That will affect the organization. That is the business or liquidity risk. Okay, so here we have again subtypes in the liquidity risk or business risk. So that is, one is asset liquidity risk and second one is funding liquidity risk. One is under business or liquidity risk, we have 2 types. One is asset liquidity and second one is funding liquidity. See here, very simple concept. Asset liquidity, already told you, liquidity means easily convertible into cash. We can convert the assets into cash. Funding liquidity, that is what investment. That investment can be converted easily into cash. Okay, let me explain those 2 types under business or liquidity risk. First one, asset liquidity risk. Asset liquidity risk is due to losses arising from an inability to sell or pledge assets at or near their carrying value when needed. So asset liquidity risk happens or loss arising from the inability to sell. If an organization is not able to sell or pledge the assets at the nearest value or nearest worth of those assets, that is the asset liquidity risk. Company is not able to pledge their assets at their market value or nearest market value or nearest book value. Okay, so that is what a risk. ಕಂಪನಿಗೆ ತನ್ನ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸನ್ನು ಅದರ ಬುಕ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂ ಅಥವಾ ನಿಯರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಬುಕ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಗೆ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿ ಪ್ಲೆಡ್ಜ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿ ಆಗ್ತಾಯಿಲ್ಲ. Certain conditions will be arises. In that conditions, the company is not able to sell their assets, or company cannot able to pledge their assets at their nearest book value. For example, assets sold at a lesser value than their book value. This is a best example for the asset liquidity risk. So company is not able to sell the assets, cannot pledge their assets at their book value, or they sold lesser than the book value. Book value, so for example, asset A having a book value of rupees 1 lakh, the company is not able to sell the same asset at 1 lakh rupees, but they sold at 80,000 rupees. 1 ಲಕ್ಷ ಬೆಲೆ ಬಾಳೋ ಅಸೆಟ್ಟನ್ನು 80,000ಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. This is what the assets is sold at lesser than the book value. This is a asset liquidity risk. And next, funding liquidity risk. Funding, which means investment. Funding liquidity risk exists for not having an access to the sufficient funds to make a payment on time. The company is not having any access to the sufficient funds. They don't have any plan, or they don't have any pre-plan to invest in a particular funds, and they are not able to make a payment on time. They have invested, people have invested in the company has to pay dividends, interest to the debenture holders, dividends to the shareholders, interest to the banks and other creditors, but the company is not able to pay that payment on time. This is funding liquidity risk. They are not able to convert their fundings, their investments into cash easily. This is what funding liquidity is. ಅವರು ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರೋದನ್ನು ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. That is funding liquidity risk. For example, when commitments made to customers are not fulfilled as discussed in the SLA. SLA means service level agreement. So service level agreement, SLA, service level agreements. So at the time of investment, the people or the customer will going to accept certain conditions. They has to obey certain rules and regulations of the organization. If they accept those rules and regulations, it is nothing but they have accepted. They are ready to accept any consequences. So here, if the company is not able to fulfill the customer needs as discussed in the SLA, the two service level agreement, that will leads to a lose in worthiness of that company, and again the same customer will not going to invest in the company. This is what funding liquidity risk. ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಕಸ್ಟಮರ್ಸ್ ಹತ್ರ ಒಂದು ಸಾರಿ ನಾವೇನು ಒಪ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತೀವೋ, ಇಂತಹ ಬೆನಿಫಿಟ್ಸನ್ನು ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಇಂಥ ಟೈಮ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಪೇಮೆಂಟ್ಸನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅದನ್ನು ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ. ವಿ ಆರ್ ಫೇಲ್ಡ್ ಟು ಪೇ ದ ಪೇಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಟು ದ ಕಸ್ಟಮರ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಟು ದ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್, we are not able to pay the dividends to the shareholders on time, as we discussed in the service level agreement. So that is funding liquidity risk. And next, second type in the unsystematic risk, that is financial or credit risk. Financial risk is also known as credit risk. It arises due to changes in the capital structure of the organization. Capital structure. The credit risk arises due to changes in the capital structure of the organization. I'll tell you later. The capital structure mainly comprises of three ways by which funds are sourced for the projects. I think you might have known the capital structure of the organization. Capital structure means the sources of funds, how and where the organization is mobilizing the funds. ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಫಂಡ್ಸನ್ನು ಮೊಬಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಕಂಪನಿ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್. ವಿ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ನೋ ಕಂಪನಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಮೊಬಲೈಸ್ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಶೇರ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್, from the retained earnings, and from issuing shares and debentures. Okay, let me explain one by one. See, the capital structure consists of owned funds, that is owner's capital, which is popularly known as share capital. Owned funds are owner's capital, the capital which is invested by the owners, that is a share capital. And second one is borrowed funds, which is borrowed from outside the organization through issuing shares and debentures or by getting loans from the banks, that is loan funds. And lastly, retained earnings. Retained earnings means surplus or reserve, the amount which is set aside to meet future consequences, to meet future losses, that is retained earnings. The retained earnings consist of reserves and surplus, provisions and all. Okay, so this is the capital structure of any organization. So this is a capital structure of the organization. So this risk, financial risk or credit risk, is arises in the changes in this capital structure. If the company capital structure is changed, definitely they'll get a financial risk. If people is not interested to invest in a company, definitely that company will incur a financial risk or credit risk. If retained earnings are very less, definitely they has to incur the financial risk. If the share capital, if the owner's capital is low in the organization, they can't run the business organization. That is what financial risk or credit risk. ಹಿಯರ್ ನಮಗೆ ಯಾವ ಫಿನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರಲ್ಲಿ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಆಗೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಆಗುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಲಾಸು, ಡ್ಯಾಮೇಜು, ಇಂಜುರಿ. ಕಂಪನಿಗೆ ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಯಾವಾಗ ಕಂಪ್ನಿ ಹತ್ರ ಶೇರ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ, ಬಾರೋಡ್ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ, ರೀಟೈನ್ಡ್ ಅರ್ನಿಂಗ್ಸು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ, ರಿಸರ್ವ್ಸು ಸರ್ಪ್ಲಸ್ಸು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ. So in these situations, company has to face financial or credit risk. And nextly, financial risk or credit risk subtypes. So subtypes in financial or credit risk, we have 6 types. So one is exchange rate risk. Second one is recovery rate risk. Third, credit event risk. And next, non-directional risk. And next, sovereign risk. And lastly, settlement risk. So these are the subtypes under financial or credit risk. Let me explain one by one. First one is exchange rate risk. Exchange rate, I think you might have heard this word, exchange rate. Rupee to the dollar, rupee to the yen, rupee to the pound. Exchange rate will keep on changing every day. ಪ್ರತಿದಿನ ಕೂಡ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಚೇಂಜ್ ರೇಟ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಫಾರ್ $1 we have to pay 72 rupees. That is rupee value with respect to dollar. So that is what exchange rate. Okay, anyhow, here the exchange rate risk is also called as exposure rate risk. It is a form of financial risk that arises from a potential change seen in the exchange rate of one country's currency in relation to another country's currency and vice versa. Exchange rate risk arises when one country is going to deal with another country. If India is dealing with United States, definitely they do have exchange rates. They have to exchange their currencies with each other. India has to convert their rupees into dollars, and America has to convert their dollars into rupees. So this is what, and for that exchange there should be one particular exchange rate. For $1, how many rupees has to pay? So like this, for how many rupees $1 should be paid by the America. So this is what an exchange rate. That exchange changes in this exchange rate will leads to exchange rate risk. Okay, and for example, investors or businesses face it either when they have assets or operations across national borders, or if they have loans or borrowings in a foreign currency. When this exchange rate risk is arises andre, if one company or if any businessman having dealings or having commitments in the national borders, across the national borders, which means Mr. A, an Indian, having business transactions in Afghanistan, in America, in Pakistan, like that, or they have borrowed some funds in another country. A company has borrowed funds and America has invested in Indian company. So these are the international dealings. In this international dealings, the exchange rate risk may arises. ಈ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಚೇಂಜ್ ರೇಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಕಂಟ್ರಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕಂಟ್ರಿಯ ಜೊತೆ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಡೀಲಿಂಗ್ಸನ್ನು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗ ಬರಬಹುದು. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟು ರಿಕವರಿ ರೇಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ರಿಕವರಿ ರೇಟ್, ಈಗ ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ ನಮಗೆ ಲೋನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತದೆ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನಾವು ಆ ಲೋನನ್ನು ವಿತಿನ್ ದ ಸ್ಟಿಪ್ಯುಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಪೀರಿಯಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಟೈಮ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ರೀಪೇ ದಟ್ ಲೋನ್ ವಿತ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್, ಅಲಾಂಗ್ ವಿತ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್. If not, that amount will be treated as NPA, non-performing asset. So here also the same thing will happen. Recovery rate risk is an often neglected aspect of a credit risk analysis. The recovery rate is normally needed to be evaluated. So actually the organizations will neglect this recovery rate risk. Recovery rate means what sort of funds are recovered by the organization. The company is going to invest in another company. The company is going to provide loans to other company, other organizations or customers. That loan should be repayable by that creditors, not creditors, that debtors. ಯಾರು ಲೋನ್ ತಗೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾರೋ ಅವರು ವಾಪಸ್ ಕೊಡೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರಬೇಕು. ರಿಕವರಿ ರೇಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಆ ಅಮೌಂಟನ್ನು ರೀಪೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಇಫ್ ದೇ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ರೆಡಿ ಟು ರೀಪೇ ದ ಲೋನ್, ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ರಿಕವರಿ ರೇಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ವಿಲ್ ಅಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ದ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್, ವಿಲ್ ಅರೈಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್. ಅದನ್ನು ಅನಾಲಿಸಿಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಆದರೆ ಕಂಪನಿ, ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಕಂಪನೀಸ್ ಫೇಲ್ಡ್ ಟು ಅನಲೈಸ್ ದ ರಿಕವರಿ ರೇಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಬಂದೇ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. ಒಂದು ಸಾರಿ ನಾವು ದುಡ್ಡು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ ದೇರ್ ಲೀಗಲ್ ಆಬ್ಲಿಗೇಷನ್ ಟು ಪೇ ಇಟ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ನಾವು ತೊಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ರೈಟ್, ನಾವು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅವರ್ ರೈಟ್ ಟು ರಿಕವರ್ ದಟ್ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದೇರ್ ಆಬ್ಲಿಗೇಷನ್ ಟು ಪೇ ಇಟ್. ನಾವು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು, ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಅವ್ರು ಕೊಡೋದು ಅವ್ರ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ, ನಾವು ಇಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಹಕ್ಕು. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಏನಪ್ಪ ಅಂದರೆ ದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟೆಡ್ ರಿಕವರಿ ರೇಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ given as a loan to the customers by banks. the two non-banking financial companies, NBFCs. So NBFCs will give a loans, and they have their own procedure to recollect or recover that loans. Okay, so how they are going to recover that? What sort of risk, what sort of loss will arise in case of recovery of those funds or loans? That is recovery rate risk. And nextly, sovereign risk. Sovereign risk is also known, and we can understood that sovereign risk as a governmental risk. So here let me explain this. Sovereign risk is associated with the government. Here a government is unable to meet its loan obligations, to break a promise on loans it guarantees, etc. So here sovereign means it is related and associated with the government. In our country, the central bank, that is RBI, has the sole authority to deal with money aspects. Okay, so here that RBI can lend a loans to a different commercial and non-commercial banks in the country. So here, if the RBI is not able to meet that obligation, if it is not able to provide or grant loans to a different banks in the country, that is a sovereign risk. It is an entire country risk, governmental risk. ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಬರುವಂತಹ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಇದು ಸಾವರಿನ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಅಂದರೆ ಕಂಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಮನಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲವನ್ನು, ಹಣದ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲವನ್ನು RBI ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಲೋನ್ಸ್ ಕೊಡೋದು, ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಲೋನ್ ಕೊಡೋದು, ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಇಫ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಅದು ಪಾಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಸಾವರಿನ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ ಬೇರೆ ಕಂಟ್ರಿಗೆ ಲೋನ್ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ಕೊಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು ರಿಕವರಿ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಎ ಸಾವರಿನ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಸೆಟ್ಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಸೆಟ್ಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಸ್ಟ್ಸ್ ವೆನ್ counter party does not deliver a security or its value in cash as per the agreement of trade or business. Settlement risk. See, if A and B as fall in one business transaction, A has to pay 50,000 to Mr. B, but A failed to settle the amount of B. Here B may file case against Mr. A that because of Mr. A is not able to or not paid his dues, ಅವನು ಪೇ ಮಾಡದೇ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇವನು ಕೇಸ್ ಹಾಕ್ಬೋದು. ಬಟ್ ಎನಿ ಹೌ, ಸೆಟ್ಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಇಫ್ ಎನಿ ಡೆಟಾರ್ is not able to settle his dues, that creditor will has to face that problem. That is the settlement risk. Okay, so not deliver a security. Even we can understand if A is transferred a security to the B, if B is not able to pay the amount cash for that securities, this is also a settlement risk. If A sold an asset worth rupees 1 lakh to Mr. B, if B is not able to pay that 1 lakh rupees within the stipulated period of time, that is also a settlement risk. ನಾವು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅಸೆಟ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಲಿ, ನಾವು ಸೆಕ್ಯೂರಿಟೀಸ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಅಥವಾ ನಾವು ಯಾವುದಾದ್ರೂ ಒಂದು ಡೀಲಿಂಗ್ ಅಗ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಆ ಅಗ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ನಮಗೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಕೊಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಅವನು ಸೆಟ್ಲ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ, ಅಥವಾ ನಾವು ಸೆಟ್ಲ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಸೆಟ್ಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. And next to operational risk. So this is the third type, unsystematic risk. So operational risk are the business process risk failing due to human errors. Operational risk. So the risk or damage or injury or loss will arises due to operational activities, failed to fulfill the operations or failed to failing due to human errors, human resource. If failed to fulfill their roles and responsibilities, definitely operational risk will arise in the organization. ಕಂಪನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋ ಕೆಲಸಗಾರರು ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಅವರ ಡ್ಯೂಟೀಸನ್ನು, ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿಗಳನ್ನು ಫುಲ್ಫಿಲ್ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ಆಪರೇಷನಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ದಿಸ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ವಿಲ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಟು ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ದ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ is different from one organization to another. The culture which they do follow in the organization is different from one organization to another organization. So because of that reason, the risk, there is operational risk, will change from industry to another industry. It occurs due to breakdowns in the internal procedures, people, policies and systems. So how this risk happens ಅಂದರೆ ಡ್ಯೂ ಟು breakdowns or lockdowns or internal procedures or people or policies. Breakdown in these procedures, rules and regulations or people or policies. If any organization facing a problem of lockdown, band, strike by the employees, definitely operational risk will arise. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಅರೈಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತಂದರೆ, ಬ್ರೇಕ್ಡೌನ್, ಯಾವುದೊಂದು ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯೀಸ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಪಾಲಿಸೀಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ಸನ್ನು ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ವೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದಾಗ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಆಪರೇಷನಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಅರೈಸ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅಂಡರ್ ಆಪರೇಷನಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ 4 ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಸಬ್ ಟೈಪ್ಸ್. ಒನ್ ಈಸ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್, and is model risk, and second one is people risk, third one is legal risk, and last one is political risk. So under operational risk we have 4 different types. One is model risk, and second one is people risk, third one is legal risk, and last one is political risk. Let me explain one by one. So here first one is model risk. So model risk is involved in using various models to value financial securities. So here in the organization, in order to value the financial securities like shares and debentures, they do follow some financial models. If they follow the different models or various models in which they don't have familiarity, in which they do not have any familiarity, they are not familiar with those models, those financial models, so definitely they'll arise in that organization. Model risk will arise. It is due to a probability of loss resulting from the weakness in the financial model used in assessing and managing a risk. So as I told you, in the organization the management has to follow the various business models, financial models, to analyze and to manage and to assess the risk. ರಿಸ್ಕನ್ನು ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ಅಸೆಸ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಫಿನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ಸನ್ನು ಅಥವಾ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ಸನ್ನು ಅವರು ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಇಫ್ ಎನಿ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕರ್ಸ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಡ್ಯೂ ಟು ವೀಕ್ನೆಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಫಿನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್. ಏನಾದರೂ ಲಾಸ್ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ ಅದರ ಅರ್ಥ ಆ ಒಂದು ಫಿನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡೆಲಲ್ಲಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ ಸರಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಲೀಡ್ಸ್ ಟು ಅ ಫಿನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಪೀಪಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅರೈಸಸ್ ವೆನ್ ದ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಡು ನಾಟ್ ಫಾಲೋ ದ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ಸ್, ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಸ್ ಆರ್ ರೂಲ್ಸ್. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದೆ ಡಿವಿಯೇಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದೇರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟೆಡ್ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್. ಪೀಪಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಯಾವಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ಇಫ್ ದ ಪೀಪಲ್, ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ is not follow any rules and regulations, procedures of the organizationally rules and regulations ಅನ್ನು ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಪೀಪಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ವಿಲ್ ಅರೈಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಟ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ವಿಲ್ ಡಿವಿಯೇಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದೇರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟೆಡ್ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್. ನಾವು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋವ್ರನ್ನ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಅವರ ಅರ್ಲಿಯರ್ ರೆಟ್ರಾಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ಗೂ ಪ್ರಾಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ಗೂ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ಗೂ ತುಂಬ ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ Legal risk. It is arises when the parties are not lawfully competent to enter an agreement among themselves. The persons who are going to enter into an agreement, if they are not lawfully competent to enter into that agreement, or that you know particular lawful agreement, so definitely they'll arise ಲೀಗಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅಂದರೆ, ಸೊ ಇಬ್ಬರು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಅಗ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಲಾಫುಲಿ ಅಗ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಇನ್ ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ದೇ ನೀಡ್ ಟು ಫೇಸ್ ದ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಲೀಗಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. Furthermore, this relates to the regulatory risk, where a transaction could conflict with a government policy or particular legislation, might be amended in the future with retrospective effect. Here, see, once ಕಂಪನಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಇವಾಗ ಒಂದು ರೂಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತು, ಅದು ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆದರೆ ಫ್ಯೂಚರಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಲೀಗಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ಗೆ ಕಾರಣ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ಲು, ಇವಾಗ ಕನಿಷ್ಠ 10 ಮೆಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಇರೋ 10 ಮೆಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯೀಸ್ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ PF ಇರಬೇಕು, ESI ಇರಬೇಕು, ಇಂತಹ ಫೆಸಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಗೌರ್ನಮೆಂಟ್ ರೂಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಅದೇ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನಲ್ಲಿ 5 ಮೆಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಬಂದರು, ಆವಾಗ ತೆಗೆದಾಕೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಲೀಗಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಅಂದರೆ ಲೀಗಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಅಗ್ರಿಮೆಂಟನ್ನು ಅಥವಾ ರೂಲ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ರೆಗ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ಸನ್ನು ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡದೇ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಮೈಟ್ ಬಿ ಅರೈಸ್ ಇನ್ ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಟ್ ಗಿವ್ ರೆಟ್ರಾಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್, ಹಿಂದೆ ಏನು ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೋ ಅದಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ, ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. It occurs due to changes in a government policies. Such changes may have an unfavorable impact on an investor. It is especially prevalent in the third world countries. ಈ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಡ್ಯೂ ಟು changes in government policy. If government keep on changing their government, so in political parties, ನಮ್ಮ ಕಂಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲಷ್ಟೇ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟೀಸು ಈ ವರ್ಷ ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಇದ್ದರೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಬಂದಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಇನ್ನು 5 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಬಂದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಎ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ. ದಟ್ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ ವಿಲ್ ಲೀಡ್ಸ್ ಟು ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್. ಓಕೆ, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಐ ಹೋಪ್ ಯು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.